Perfect. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I love the Big Tree program and talking about Big Tree. I'm excited to share more information about the National Big Tree program, everyone involved, and become future Big Tree hunters. All right, so let's get started. My presentation today, I'll talk about American forests and what we do, the National Big Tree program, the National Register of Big Trees, current projects that we have going on, such as the working groups and our tree protection toolkit, and then the future of the program, not just on the national level, but also for the state and local level as well. American Forest is the oldest conservation organization in the United States. It was founded in 1875 by a group of concerned citizens led by John Aston Warder after a decade of unprecedented forest destruction following the Civil War. And so our mission from 1875 all the way up to 2013 has essentially been the same, and that's to protect and restore forests, helping to preserve the health of our planet for the benefit of its inhabitants. Our vision is for a future world in which forests are thriving and valued because everyone understands how important they are for the environment and their social and economic benefits. American Forest has a variety of programs to address many facets of forest protection and restoration. We work with partners to plant millions of trees each year, in which we've planted more than 44 million trees in forests throughout the US and in 44 countries. We educate the public on the importance of forests through our website, magazine, and other publications. We advocate for forests and public policies such as the Farm Bill and Trees Act. And then we also work to unite local experts to assist their communities and raise awareness about the tremendous benefits of urban and community trees. So, the crux of today's presentation, why are big trees important? What's the need for big trees? It's a major feat for trees and forests to survive disease and pests, storms, forest fires, and the consequences of living alongside human beings. By promoting the iconic stature of big trees, we're helping to educate people about the key role that trees and forests play in sustaining a healthy environment. Trees are one of the few things that appreciate and value as they grow older. The bigger the tree, the more ecological services they provide. They clean more air, filter more water, sequester more carbon, and increase quality of life for people. Big trees are great to research because of the size and ranges of plant communities. They help us understand where each species grows the best and the conditions a forest ecosystem needs in order to thrive. Forest ecologists study the canopy of coast redwoods, old-growth forests, and superlative trees such as hemlocks to not only document the volume and maximum heights of these trees, but also understand what these giants are facing regarding climate change and the disease and pests. They also hold cultural significance in our communities. More people will rally to protect and save a tree because of its history, exceptional size, form, age, and we see that through tree ordinances in local municipalities. Many national park systems, such as Sequoia National Park, have been established to protect special trees. One example, as seen here in the photograph, is the Seven Sisters oak. This tree is not only a national champion, but it's also the president of the Live Oak Society, which is a unique organization whose members are all live oak trees. So there's no people who run this organization. It's just live oak trees, and the Seven Sisters Oak is the president. And what makes it unique is that there are more than 7,100 live oaks registered across 14 states to preserve southern live oak trees in the country. So how do we recognize these trees on a national level? American Forest National Big Tree Program enlists hundreds of volunteers from all over the country in locating, protecting, and registering the biggest trees, while also educating the public about the benefits of mature trees in forests. It's active in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and it's used as a model for international programs such as South Korea, New Zealand, Mexico, Australia, Puerto Rico reached out to me 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know Puerto Rico had a program. Hungary, the UK, these programs are everywhere. So we see big trees in parks, backyards, driving down the road. Your grandmother might have a large pecan tree in her backyard. But what makes a national champion? It's all about total points based on three measurements. You have circumference in inches, height in feet, and 1/4 of the average crown spread. So the tree with the most total points becomes a national champion. And trees within 5 points of each other become a co-champion. So it's possible that you can have trees that are more than 300 feet tall, which is coast redwoods, for example. And then you have other species that may only reach 30 feet, but they're still the biggest of their kind. And the biggest tree on the list is seen here, General Sherman, giant sequoia, has a total of 1,321 points. And the unique thing what I love about this photo is, of course, the size. You see this young woman hugging a tree, but uh, the woman in the photo, her name is Christina Hertz, and she actually did a cross-country road trip just to view state and national champion trees. She, I think, visited probably like more than 20 states and had visited dozens and dozens of national champion trees. Her standing at the base of General Sherman. There are more than 870 native and naturalized species that are eligible to become a national champion. That's a lot of trees that we recognize. And we do this based on resources such as USDA plants database and the integrated taxonomic information system, or ITIS databases. And what's interesting that I point out why I say the plants and ITIS databases, those are common resources used in the field of forestry, but for American forests, for the longest time, we still were using Dr. Little's 1979 publication. Ouch, it hurts me to say 1979, but we finally caught up with the times. And what was important about this is that Dr. Little's publication didn't recognize Hawaii's species. And so now Hawaii is on the list, which is why I pointed out their poetry here on the slide. They have 16 species that are recognized on the register, and so all 50 states are now eligible to participate in the program. The National Register of Big Trees is our online publication that recognizes more than 750 of the biggest native and naturalized species in the country. Last year was the first time we updated the list twice a year, so it's in the spring and the fall. And every 2 years, we do a PDF, and you see the cover of the 2012 National Register. So the next PDF of the register will be spring 2014, in which you will have pictures and photos and a message from me, CEO, that type of thing. There are 3 trees that have been on the list since 1940, and one of them is in Utah. So we have the giant sequoia, which we featured already, the western juniper, Stanislaus National Forest, and then we also have the Rocky Mountain juniper in Cache National Forest in Utah. So that's impressive. 3 trees out of since 1940, 70 plus years in this program. Those are the only ones who have retained their title continuously the entire time. So the National Register, we recognize these big trees. It's fun. You know, you're driving through Florida and you're like, hey, oh, I heard this is the biggest swamp bay, or you're in Virginia. The Osage Orange is located at the home of Patrick Henry. And we have all these states, they're superlatives, and Florida continues to be on top with more than 130 champions. But what's interesting and what's also kind of daunting as the coordinator for the program is that it's supposed to be a friendly competition, but every state wants their bragging rights. And, you know, who knew it could be so controversial to give the title of a champion tree to a neighboring state. So I've had, someone in Montana challenge the validity of a tree in Oregon, or someone in North Carolina challenge the validity of a tree in Connecticut. It happens. It's a friendly competition, which is great that people are passionate about the program, but it's definitely all about the bragging rights. Um, and Utah is on the list with 7 national champions. When I first started working with the Big Tree program, I learned early on every state has Big Tree hunters. Now, Big Tree hunters are a special group of people who devote their time to finding and measuring the biggest trees in the country. It's a hobby, it's a recreation for them. And the great thing about big tree hunting is that anyone can do it. Andy Sawyer is the state coordinator for Michigan's Big Tree program. He goes out with his son Noah to find big trees, and those two together may have like a dozen national champions. Um, Byron and Gary here on the left, they actually have the most national champions with 44 champions in Virginia and North Carolina. So even though they're based in Hampton Roads, Virginia, they have crossed state lines into Virginia, into North Carolina. And last I heard, Gary told me that they were venturing down into South Carolina and Georgia as well. I actually went on a big tree trip with Byron and Gary on the Meherrin River in April to view some of their state champs. And when they say like over the river through the woods type of swamp, being on that trip, they actually mean it. We stop on the side of the bank of the river to view a potential hickory tree. And I get out of the kayak to step on the bank of the river, lost my footing. I try harder and harder and harder, and I just eventually swoop, fell right into the river. And I'm standing there, I'm like, holding onto the tree bench. Can someone please help me pull me out of the river? And Jeff Kerwin was with us on that trip, and he's looking down at the top of the hill, and he's like, Sheri, what are you doing? Like, what's going on right there? I'm like, oh, just hanging out to this tree branch, trying not to get swept down river. And so it took 3 people to help me climb up this embankment just to see the potential national champion hickory tree. Everyone was like, "Oh, good job." I mean, they're not congratulating me like, "Oh, you were part of this discovery." They're just congratulating me that I finally was got out of this like muddy river. And I did my best Rocky impression at the top of the hill. So maybe they'll give me some credit as a nominator because I actually climbed up the muddy river. There are trees anywhere between 20 points, and then we have a General Sherman, which is like over 1,000 points. But there is this special category of the biggest of the big, and we call them mega trees. These are trees with more than 650 points, and there are only 16 trees that hold this title. Most of them are on the West Coast in California, Oregon, and Washington. The bald cypress, co-champion bald cypress trees, Louisiana and Mississippi are the only 2 found outside of the West Coast. Here on the left, you have Lost Monarch, which is the second biggest tree on the National Register with 1,290 points. And on the right, you have the Fremont Cottonwood, Skull Valley, Arizona, with big tree hunters, David Thornburg and Allgood. Those 2 together actually have 30 plus national champions to their name. And on the opposite end of the spectrum are what I love to call our tiny titans. They're so cute. These are trees with 50 points or less. And the Reverend Hawthorne is actually the smallest champion with 21 points. So you look at this tree, it's only 10 feet tall. I mean, it looks like it's a sapling, basically. But it's the biggest of its kind, and therefore it is still a national champion. In the spring 2013 register we put out this past April, there are more than 40 champions that were crowned. Some of which was the ponderosa pine in Oregon, which was a big news story because that tree was originally nominated in 1945 and had been lost. It was standing in the middle of the field, and so Ascending the Giants in Oregon went out to remeasure that tree and became a national champion. Some other new trees added to the list was a palm coconut in Hawaii, an American basswood located in Henry Clay's tomb in historic Lexington Cemetery. And so people always wonder, well, how do you crown a tree? How does a tree lose its title? Trees get on the list if it's another tree was found, so it just flats out has more points. If the reigning champion is deceased, you can't recognize it because it's not living. Sometimes trees have been misidentified, which is the case. Someone will send in a leaf sample to an arboretum or university, find out it's not actually a rock elm, for example, and it has to be dethroned. And then, unfortunately, trees lose their title because of the 10-year rule, which says trees have to be remeasured every 10 years. And the reason why we have that is because sometimes trees may have been lost, they may have died, they may have broken limbs, so we have to send state coordinators out there to verify that the tree is still in existence. As you can see, that's me. Yay, measuring a tree. Woo. There are more than 200 species without a champion. And so when people ask me, how do I find a champion tree? I'm like, you know what? Your best chances, go look for one of the 200 plus species without a champion, and you'll get your claim to fame for the National Register of Big Trees. The beauty of this program is you don't need a hypsometer, you don't need a laser rangefinder, you don't need a clinometer. You only need a measuring tape and a ruler. And our website has measuring guidelines for anyone to learn how to use just the stick method to measure the height of a tree. And of course, we want you to contact your state coordinator for assistance. And so that would be Meridith if you're in Utah. American Forest. On our website, we have a directory which lists all 51 state programs, contact information, as well as a link to their state register. So some of our current projects right now, we have our working groups. This year, we launched the Measuring Guidelines Working Group and the Eligible Species Working Group, which encompasses a diverse group of experts assisting the national program with addressing some of the tough questions in crowning champion trees, everything from updating taxonomy and nomenclature to reviewing measuring guidelines. How do we handle the multiple stem issue? That's why we created these working groups this year. We've also launched our tree protection toolkit, and I'm going to talk about what's going on with public outreach. How are we trying to build the big tree community? So primarily the measuring guidelines working group, they are working to establish guidelines for trees with multiple trunks, develop standards for photo requirements. What do we do about tropical species? I know a lot of times, someone in the field might be measuring air versus wood. And then what can we do on the national level to develop these diagrams, standards, using different tools for these certifiers out in the field? So you have a perfect example here looking at this Canyon live oak, and have someone go up into the field and they're just like, where do I take the circumference of this tree at DBH? So we want to make sure that regardless of if you're in California or in Florida or Michigan, Utah, Maine, everyone has the same guidelines for measuring a tree. It's always up to the certifiers, this gray area that we're trying to eliminate so that we're all on the same page and that we are accurately measuring and recording this information for the national register as well as the state registers. the eligible species working group. The last time that we updated the species list was in 2009. And so we have to figure out what's our process going to be moving forward. Is it going to be every other year, every 2 to 3 years? How are we going to address revising um, the list of native and naturalized species? Also making sure that we establish a position on the inclusion of invasive species, cultivars, and hybrids. So we, American Forest, has had a rule of if it's here in the United States, we will recognize it. But as a conservation organization, we have to question, you know, do we want to promote tree of heaven or other invasive species um, on the national register when we say that big trees are supposed to provide these ecological services for the environment? The other big task for the eligible species working group is going through the entire current current list of eligible species, looking at the taxonomy and the nomenclature, revising all of the common names and the scientific names. Um, and so by next year, by spring 2014, we have this list and we can move forward and incorporate what a lot of the state programs are doing. There are a lot of states who don't recognize invasives. There are states who don't recognize cultivars, but then there are some states that do. And so we at a national level have to figure out what can we do to be inclusive of what's going on the ground level. We launched our tree protection toolkit, not just for big trees, but just for trees in general, because we say that trees are champions for the environment. I get a lot of inquiries from the public um, who have their trees that are threatened due to construction expansion. It can be a pesky neighbor who just don't know about the benefits of trees. The city might be uprooting a historic tree in the center of town, and they're like, what can we do about it? And so as part of the Big Tree program, it's our mission to protect not just big trees, but just trees in general. And from that spawned the Tree Protection Toolkit. And on our website, it actually has a step-by-step guide on how to protect a threatened tree. It has information on tree ordinances. A lot of people don't know what a tree ordinance is, so we define it for them. It provides contact information for arborists, tools to calculate the value of a tree, because trees do have monetary value as well as, the social and ecological values. Um, we provide ways to garner community support. And then we also have a letter template. So if people want to write to their city officials, if they want to start a petition, we've provided those resources for them. What is so it's like, what is the future of the program? Not just the national program, but also the state programs and local programs as well. One of the things that will be coming out that really engages the public is the Big Tree Calendar. We're really excited to partner with Davy again to produce this calendar, to give it out to nominators and owners, but also have it as a marketing tool to expand the Big Tree community for American Forest as well as on the state level. We are thinking about doing story maps in which you would come to our website, you would see a map of the United States and then different GPS points, which are the coordinates for a national champion tree. You scroll over that champion tree and there would be a description of the champion tree, a story to go with it, a photo, just different ways to engage people so that, they're not just looking at measurements on a website, but they're learning about the history of that tree, and they're also gaining access to the location of that tree. So if they are in that area visiting a park, or if they want to do something with the school or with their family, we're giving them access so they can go visit these trees. We're looking at webinars as a way to educate people through our working groups. At the end of that, we want to have sessions on, well, what this is what our outcome is on how to accurately measure the height of a tree, or if you're using a chronometer, if you're using a laser rangefinder, um, just providing more educational tools for people with the program so that we're all on the same page when it comes to recording these trees. And then also geocaching. We used to have a geocaching program and we're thinking of bringing it back. It's like, what can we do to make it fun? Like, families do these road trips. I know with my Amtrak app on my phone, I love checking into places. I love getting badges and tools. There are big tree tours. Utah has big tree tours. South Carolina, Virginia, Florida. There are just so many things that we can do to engage the public with the Big Tree program and then get them to become stewards of the environment. And then lastly, how can you stay connected to American forests? Well, I'm glad you asked that. We have our magazine, newsletter, loose leaf, blog, and social media. And the great thing about all of those publications and communication platforms is that we feature big trees all the time. In the magazine, we have a full-page big tree showcase. In this upcoming issue for fall 2013, we are highlighting the alligator juniper in Arizona, which was saved by the Granite Mountain Hotshots, the group of gentlemen who unfortunately lost their lives to the Dose fire. But these guys saved the alligator juniper when they found out it was a national champion. And so we're going to feature that in our magazine as well as do a web exclusive. In Forest Files, we have our Standing Tall feature in which Meridith has written a story for us, which you can find on our website, which was about measuring their champion trees. And then on Facebook and Twitter, there's always interesting news about American forests and big trees. And next year, if you can hold on that long, we have our Big Tree Madness, in which we have our own version of March Madness, and we go through the Sweet 16 and the Final Four rounds to crown the ultimate big tree of the year. So there's a lot of just fun things that we're doing to reach out there to educate the public about the importance of trees and forests through the National Big Tree Program.
All right, I think I'm up here. I just want to thank Sheri for being a part of this webinar. It is so great to have American Forest as a partner in the Big Tree program. Our state program wouldn't be what it is if we didn't have the national program to look up to and to partner with, and it gives a lot of validity to what we do here in Utah. So thanks, Sheri, for being a part of this and for all that you do across the country to celebrate big trees. For my portion of this presentation, what I want to do is to really encourage the folks on the webinar to explore Utah's big trees. I'll talk a little bit about our program and then highlight a few of our champion trees that are worth a visit. Let's see. All right, so first of all, I just want to go over the basics. Sheri talked about the basic measurement issues with big trees, and we do follow pretty strictly to the American Forest measurement standards: height, trunk, circumference at 4.5 feet, but not the diameter. We're measuring circumference, and there are some tricky measurement requirements because of the codominant stems and different things that big trees often have. As a big tree hunter, you'll want to make sure you visit American Forest for those specific measuring guidelines, because they do sometimes vary from your traditional 4.5 foot or traditional forestry measurements that I know I'm used to. And then we take the canopy spread, and unfortunately that's only 1/4 of the total point value in canopy spread, but that's how we calculate the total point values for the big trees nationally as well as at the Utah level. We have 194 big trees on our state registry and 7 national champions. 2 pairs, so 4 trees on that national champion list are actually co-champions, and they're both mountain mahoganies. We have co-champions for the curl leaf mountain mahogany and co-champion results for the alderleaf mountain mahogany on the National Registry. So I encourage you to check those out. The website here at the bottom is utahurbanforest.org. That is where we host the list of big trees for Utah. So you can go there and you'll see a map and a list of all of the trees that we have on our registry. We are currently working to continue to update that and add photos and get measurements. It's a process to make sure that all of these things are up to date. So we're constantly working on that. All right, as far as the program basics go, I just wanted to show everyone that it's really easy to nominate a tree. Basically, the first thing everybody has to do is fill out a nomination form. Once I get that form at my office, I know kind of the general description of the tree, where it's at, an estimate of the measurements, and then we can send someone out to verify that that tree will in fact be a state champion. And really, if you think it's a competitor for the national championship, filling out this form, bringing it to our attention, then we can elevate it to the national register as well. So this is kind of step number one. The only thing I want to point out here is that a tree cannot be listed if the owner does not want it to. It looks like I'm having a little bit of an issue with my PowerPoint slides here, but that basically says if the owner does not accept that that nomination should be there. We have sometimes had people nominate trees that don't belong to them, and unfortunately the owner has some objection to being on the list. So make sure that that's always checked before we get that nomination in place. All right, and then once the nomination has been accepted, then we send the owner and the nominator this nifty little certificate. It's very frame worthy. It's cute. I have actually heard from a number of different big tree owners that they have framed and prominently displayed their big tree certificates, and it does look a little bit nicer than this. I think my font and formatting is a little bit wonky in this presentation, but basically it's bragging rights, like Sheri mentioned in her presentation. People love to have that recognition to know that their tree is the biggest species in the state. Another thing, just going back to the differences between American forests and the state registry, Sheri had mentioned that only native and naturalized species are recognized on the national registry. On the Utah registry, we're much more flexible. We recognize pretty much any big tree. So we'll include non-natives, we'll include landscape trees. We kind of are an all-inclusive program and want to make sure that big trees are celebrated no matter what they are. So anything that you find that isn't on our list already, bring it to our attention, and it's likely that we'll find a space for it. All right, and then I did want to point this out. Thanks to Darren Nurdin, West Valley City Forester and a member of our Big Tree Committee, who compiled this list of potential Utah champions. These are national champions that are either vacant or low in number that we might be able to be competitive for here in Utah. I don't think that we'll ever be able to compete with Florida for the number of national champions in our state, but here's a few opportunities for us to creep up into at least the double digits. The state is planning to check out confirm the current state champions on this first list and then nominate them for national recognition. But this second list and all the vacant spaces are up here to encourage all of you to take a good look and start looking around your neighborhoods and your favorite hiking trails to see if you can find some of these trees that might be national champion competitors. Okay, sometimes it is about the journey. We are always looking for new champions, but we also want to promote big trees currently on the list and encourage people to go out and actually experience them. You just can't imagine what it's like to see some of these trees. The pictures just don't do them justice. Going with a group also really leads to a lot of interesting discussion. I've gone on a lot of these remeasurement trips. This one in particular, we were en route to find the curl-leaf mountain mahogany on the Fish Lake National Forest, and it was an eclectic group of Forest Service, BLM, DWR, State Forestry, and even a botanist came along. And I learned more about penstemons and horny toads during that trip than I did about trees at all. It was just a wonderful opportunity to get together with a lot of like-minded people and enjoy the naturescape as well as, experience the big trees. So I want to, in the next few slides, go over a few pretty accessible trees that are really worthy of a visit. All right. So this Osage orange it's right around the corner from my office, and took me putting this presentation together to actually go out and visit it. Sometimes big trees are just out your front door. Yard trees, street trees play a prominent role in the Utah Big Tree Registry because these trees are typically nominated by their owners and arborists who care for them, and they're planted and well cared for. So they're often in the public eye a lot, and they're often unique species because they were planted as landscape trees. They're also easy to visit because you can walk to them, bike to them, or drive to them. So again, on that map that we have on our website, you can see exactly where these locations are, and we often have, just the street address or a trail name that provides pretty easy access, or GPS coordinates. But with street trees and private trees, we just ask that you maintain private property space and allow for people to, don't tread on people's private property, enjoy the trees from the street or the sidewalk. Okay, Utah State University campus is home to a number of big trees. There are 13 big trees located on Old Main Hill alone. Utah campuses are great places to find big trees. One of the reasons is because a lot of the trees are very old, and so they are very massive. But another reason is because campuses typically plant unique species diversity. They're very committed to diversity, I think, for aesthetic as well as educational interest. So if you're out and about and visiting some of these campuses across the state, drop by it or take a look at some of the big trees that we have on our list while you're there. The University of Utah in Salt Lake City also has 12 big trees, and Brigham Young University in Provo has 11 big trees. They also are just some of the most unique trees. This blue ash here on Old Main Hill happens to be a pretty big tree, as well as the only blue ash I'm familiar with in the state. So it's a fun place to kind of work on your tree ID as well as look at some amazing trees. All right, other big trees are part of Utah's natural beauty. There are native trees that stand out for their abnormally large stature. Located along the main road in Snow Canyon State Park, at the end of an aptly named hackberry wash, grows this giant netleaf hackberry. According to the USDA, netleaf hackberry typically only grow to be 20 foot tall, and this tree is twice that normal size at maturity. So we think that maybe because it's located near that wash, it gives it an advantage. I think this is an important thing to point out, that big trees sometimes are because they are genetically predisposed to being large, and sometimes they're big because of their circumstance in which they're growing, and sometimes it's a combination of the two. This is a great tree and an easy tree to visit. All right, many native big trees are identified by hikers along designated trails. This makes them easy access to make for friend and family destinations. This champion alderleaf mountain mahogany is in Ness Canyon. It's a short hike right by a big pile of mine tailings, so you can't, well, you could miss it, but if you're looking, you can find it. The Big Tree Committee visited the co-champion this past winter to determine if the tree was true to its deciduous nature. But as you can see there with Jaron Farley's sample, it is an evergreen. So we are now going to be working with Utah State University and others to determine if the tree is actually a hybrid with its curly mountain mahogany cousin, which is evergreen. So we'll be looking into that a little bit more. All right, visiting a national champion can also be incorporated into your vacation plans. Utah federally protected lands have some of our best big trees. I think this is one. The Sheri mentioned that there was a woman that had done a cross-country trip to visit some of the big trees, and now that I say that, maybe I think it was the Jardine juniper that she visited here in Utah. But the bristlecone pine is a great tree to visit if you're in the Cedar Breaks National Monument area. Just take a short hike along Spectra Point Trail, and you can see this reigning champion bristlecone pine. Bristlecone pine is the largest living tree the oldest living tree in the world. They can live up to 5,000 years. So this tree may be the oldest on our registry. And you can see if you just go down at the very end of this path in the picture, you can see the bristlecone, the snag part of the bristlecone pine. An interesting part of the measurement requirements for American forest is that even if the tree must have some live foliage attached to the tree showing that it's alive, but the height can be measured at the tallest point, even if the tallest point is a dead snag. So we were able to measure this bristlecone at that very peak at the tip. When you hike out to this point as well, you will see some of Utah's most breathtaking geology out at Cedar Breaks National Monument. Okay, the Jardine juniper, I didn't know that it was one of only 3 trees on the National Registry since 1940, so that was great information that Sheri shared in her presentation. It is an old Utah champion, and we think that it's estimated to be over 1,500 years old. Trekking to this tree might take a little bit more effort than some of the previous ones I've mentioned. The trail bearing the tree's name is about 11 miles round trip, but it's really well worth the hike. The trail is also accessible to mountain bikers and dogs, so you can kind of bring whatever mode of transportation you'd like. It's very popular for locals and visitors to the area. You don't realize how big these trees are until you go up and meet them in person. So I encourage you to take that hike if you're in the Logan Canyon area. The trail's about 10 miles up the canyon after Wood Camp Campground. The tree is on the Big Tree Committee's list for remeasuring soon. Sheri had mentioned national champions must be remeasured every 10 years. So we'll be remeasuring the Jardine juniper probably next summer, and always welcome anyone interested in joining to let me know, and we'll get you on the email train and make sure that you're invited when we head out to do that remeasurement. All right, sometimes trees require venturing off the beaten path. To experience another national champion tree, the limber pine, it requires a steep 1-mile hike on a trail up to Pittsburgh Lake, but then a rock scramble to find this tree. This breathtaking pine appears to be growing right out of the rock, and the roots are clinging to the cliff face. It's really impressive. The lightning has scarred the trunk of the tree. The tree is still surviving pretty well. I remeasured the tree in 2007, and at that time there were no GPS coordinates. So we just had these vague instructions that said, located on a rocky ridge about 1/4 of a half a mile on the southwest side from the lake. And I have to admit, it was pretty adventurous and pretty fun just to go up with that kind of information and search for the tree. So I encourage you to stumble around to find this tree if you end up at Pittsburgh Lake. Once you see it, you'll definitely know it's there, that you found it. The Pittsburgh Lake trailhead is a little tricky to find. If you take the American Fork Canyon, if you take the left-hand fork of American Fork Canyon past Timpanogos Cave, and then follow this road past Tibble Fork Reservoir, the road turns gravel, and we were really glad to have had 4-wheel drive during this, so I'd advise that if you're planning on taking this adventure. The trail is about 4 miles up on that gravel road to the right. And if you get up to the lake, there's a great remnant mining cabin there as well. It's a beautiful location. All right, well, sometimes trees surprise you. People kept reporting native stands of giant sequoia in Pine Valley. So Mike Coons, the USU Extension forester and now Wildland Resource Department head, finally had to check it out. This was years ago. It turned out that the giant sequoia seedlings had been planted behind this browse guard station in the early 1930s as part of a study for vegetation for browsing animals. Now, the giant is thriving like a native. It was so amazing to see such a healthy, thriving, non-native tree in such an odd location. I don't think we'll ever get a giant sequoia to compete with those national champions that Sheri pointed out. But this is a pretty big tree for Utah, and a giant sequoia out in the middle of nature is an interesting sight to see. Getting to this tree is tricky. The GPS coordinates are listed here. During some times of the year, you may be able to drive or four-wheel drive. We saw some four-wheelers up there when we were there. But the road has been closed recently, so when Mike and I went to remeasure it, we were forced to mountain bike out to the tree. It made a really hard work day. All right, the Engelmann spruce. I had the pleasure of visiting this tree just last month. The Engelmann spruce is the tallest tree on the Big Tree Register for Utah. So in June, Utah State University Extension forester Darren McAvoy teamed up with tree climbing champion Mark Malmstrom to measure the tree height by climbing all the way to the top. An article about this adventure is actually featured in this spring's, I guess it's the spring's issue of Forest News. And Rose, if you have a link to that, if you could put that in the chat pod, that would be appreciated. In the article, it's a great article about the tree and about the Big Tree program, and then it also has specifics on how to get to this Engelmann spruce tree at Tony Grove in Logan Canyon. It's not exactly on a trail, but it's a pretty easy hike to get there from the lake, and the lake is a pretty popular spot for recreation. All right, last but not least, it's my pleasure to present Utah's newest national champion candidate. The reigning champion from New Mexico has a total point score of 346. So with 349 points, Utah's Rocky Mountain White Fir is the new winner. Yay! The Big Tree Committee hiked out to remeasure this tree just last week. Not to be outdone by Mark Malmstrom, Max Darrington, another avid tree professional in the state, attempted to free climb to the top of this tree, but he didn't get too far. It was a great trip. We took a shortcut access using a private road, but as we approached the tree, we were met by two hikers approaching from the Payson trailhead. So there's a lot of different ways you can access that, and it's on an established trail. Utilizing these GPS coordinates, you can identify the best trail to get you to the tree from Payson. It's a popular destination and a great place to picnic. There's a big open area around the tree, and it's obviously been well appreciated over the years. We are always thrilled to add a new champion from Utah to the American Forest list. So this is a big excitement, and we'll be looking forward to getting all the information to Sheri here shortly and getting another one up there towards our double digits of national champions. All right, well, that pretty much wraps up what I have here for today. I only was able to highlight a very select few trees that we have on our Utah Big Tree Register, and I would encourage you to look around in your local area and maybe take some of these trips that I highlighted here and really start experiencing the trees that we have and celebrating them. It's an amazing experience to see these big trees in person and have kind of your own story to tell about what the trees have to offer and the experiences that they provide to humans and wildlife, and just see how amazing it is that they grow. Some of these, like the Jardine juniper and the limber pine, just out in the middle of rocks, how they can get so massive. So with that, I will give you my information. Please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email if you have particular questions or feedback about the Big Tree program. I'd be happy to answer those for you. And also visit the Utah Urban Forest website for the spreadsheets and all of the information about the big trees that we have on our program. Thank you.